Okay. We still have a couple in the waiting room who haven't joined yet.
I see that.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to this 47th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly B. Hall. This webinar, as you know by now, is available on Makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. Previous episodes of this series, the Secret Doctrine and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series, are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can join any of these webinars on the homepage of MoriaFederation.com. That's usually how I get in. Okay. Last time, we continued our study of the chapter entitled Isis, the Virgin of the World, where we took a look at quotes from Apuleius's Metamorphosis, which recounts the author's vision of Isis, quite a striking vision. This Roman period bust of the goddess is the closest that I could find to Apuleius's visionary description. We then took a look at Isis's association with the asp and the serpent, representing both the cycle of life and death and the wisdom gained by mastering these cycles. Secret Teachings of All Ages then moves into Isis's medicinal and alchemical associations, which we explored to some extent. We're going to be getting into the alchemy quite a bit more today. And finally, we discussed the magical implications of the 7 planetary circulations, which MPH hypothesizes were the root meaning behind the marching of the Jewish priests 7 times around the walls of Jericho, therefore mimicking the movement of the planets. And this brings us up to where we left off in mid-sentence last time. So I'll start by rereading the sentence about circumambulation before we continue. The 7 planetary circulations are represented by the circumambulations of the Masonic Lodge, by the marching of the Jewish priests 7 times around the walls of Jericho, and of the Mohammedan priests 7 times around the Kaaba at Mecca. Last time we noted that the, quote, circumambulations of the Masonic Lodge are the ritual clockwise movements of the candidates and officers around the altar in the lodge room, thus following the courses of the sun. This symbolizes the journey of life, the search for light, and the progression, the unfoldment of knowledge. The number of circumambulations depends on the degree, the Masonic degree being conferred. The quote, marching of the Jewish priests 7 times around the walls of Jericho refers to the biblical story wherein God told Joshua to have the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant and blow trumpets of ram's horns while the Israelite army marched around the city once a day for 6 days and 7 times on the 7th day. Then, when the priest sounded a long blast, the army shouted and the walls of Jericho collapsed. This was definitely an act of what we might call sonic ritual magic, what the Hindus call vril, the use of of sound for destructive purposes. I have to wonder if this was really an act of white magic or not. And that brings us to where we finished, right in the middle of the sentence. And next up is, and of the Mohammedan priests 7 times around the Kaaba at Mecca. Interestingly, whereas the Masons and the Jewish priests circulate clockwise, Mohammedans walk counterclockwise around the Kaaba, thus imitating the movement of the planets around the sun as viewed from above. In all 3 cases, 7 represents the number of completion, an outer demonstration of the one unified principle. And finally, in this passage, we have, from the crown of gold project 3 horns of plenty, signifying the abundance of the gifts of nature proceeding from one root, having its origin in the heavens, head of Isis. So, by the way, anytime you have any comments, any thoughts, any questions, please raise your hand. These are far more interesting when we have dialogue about these ideas than me just simply lecturing to you. So Isis personifies the 3rd aspect, and thus, along with that, a number of triplicities, including birth, life, and death, the mental, astral, and etheric physical realms, and the 3 gunas, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. All these are, of course, interrelated, and all fall under Isis's purview, being manifestations of the abundance represented by the triple cornucopia. Also, just if you think about the way a cornucopia is constructed, I would have illustrated one if I'd have thought of this earlier, is they start at a kind of a point, and then they spiral out a bit to this wide open circle, and from which issues the abundance. So this suggests a kind of causal source, in this case, Isis, and through her, the will of her intention, which is determined by her office, all abundance comes forth in this cornucopias type of movement from inner to outer, right? But it's interesting that there's 3, it's a triple cornucopia. Okay, next up, could we get a reader for the next passage, please?
I'll start. In this figure, the pagan naturalists represent all the vital powers of the 3 kingdoms and families of the sublunary nature: mineral, plant, and animal, man considered as an animal. At one of her ears was the moon, and at the other the sun, to indicate that these 2 were the agent and patient, the father and mother, principles of all natural objects, and that Isis, or nature, makes use of these 2 luminaries to communicate her powers to the whole empire of animals, vegetables, and minerals. On the back of her neck were the characters of the planets and the signs of the zodiac, which assisted planets in their functions. This signified that the heavenly influences directed the destinies of the principles and sperms of all things, because they were the governors of all sublunary bodies, which they transformed into little worlds made in the image of the greater universe.
Well, I really tried to find this particular sculpture that obviously MPH is looking at. Either he had, drawings of it, or, he had some bust in his library. Because it's so specific. He's been talking about it for some time now. describing its features. And it would be great, for instance, to see these characters that are inscribed on her neck. But to no avail, I could find nothing like it, unfortunately. But I'm sure it exists somewhere, maybe in his library. Okay, anyway, in this figure, the pagan naturalists represent all the vital powers of the three kingdoms and families of sublunary nature: mineral, plant, and animal, man considered as an animal. So MPH adds another triplicity over which Isis reigns. The important point here is that Isis, in conjunction with Osiris, are the source of the vitality that animates all manifestation, all manifested nature. And that source is characterized not only by the fecundity as represented by the cornucopia, but also by a subjective abundance, an intentional move from the inner to the outer with this quality of abundance. Nature, when treated with respect, will provide. Next up, at one of her ears was the moon, and at the other the sun, to indicate that these two were the agent and patient, or father and mother principles of all natural objects. The sun and moon represent both the ensouling principles and the vehicles through which these principles work, which is why Isis is considered to be the soul of the world, not just the vehicle or the outer manifestation, but the soul of the world among Hermeticists, Gnostics, and Neoplatonists. The sun and moon at her ears suggests that Isis is associated with the logoic sound and word, which was also a feminine principle in the ancient world. It was always represented by feminine goddesses. You may remember from our Secret Doctrine studies that Vash was the Hindu goddess of sound, and Kuan Yin, her Chinese counterpart. So that could be something of what's meant in that symbol of this emblems of the sun and moon at her earring, at her ears. Okay, next up. And that Isis, or nature, makes use of these two luminaries, sun and moon, to communicate her powers to the whole empire of animals, vegetables, and minerals. Thus, Isis is both veiled and unveiled, the hidden vital essence and the manifestation of that essence. It is this idea that HPB addresses when she writes, Isis is both our earth and its spiritual queen, nature physical and nature spiritual. We have to broaden our understanding of the third aspect. It's not just the lower three planes of the cosmic physical plane. It also represents the sum total of the what's called Mula Prakriti in Hinduism, that primordial substance that is the source of all the vehicles for spirit in manifestation. And to the ancients, that ensouled principle was Isis. Okay, and next. On the back of her neck were the characters of the planets and the signs of the zodiac, which assisted the planets in their function. It's a lot in that one sentence. So since it includes the signs of the astrological constellations, this statement extends Isis's relational powers beyond the solar system. suggesting that the signs both inform and ensoul the planets, and that it is this ensouling function that Isis represents. Clearly, MPH is looking at a particular statue of Isis, right? And from what I could see from other statues, it's most likely from the 2nd century Roman period, the one that he had access to. Finally, this signified that the heavenly influences directed the destinies of the principles and sperms of all things, because they were the governors of all sublunary bodies, which they transformed into little worlds made in the image of the greater universe. So by sperms, MPH means initiating essences, like, that spark at the center of all sentient beings. Here we have the principle of as above, so below, as well as the idea that the lesser is always governed by the enclosing greater. But celestial governance comes as much from intrinsic conditioning, or God immanent, as from received emanations, or God transcendent. The important point here is that Isis, as manifested nature, includes both the lesser and the greater. The sublunary bodies that make up the natural world, but also the governors of the soul aspect, that which sends them into incarnation and draws them back out. That's why she's goddess of cycles, of both the emergence and the withdrawal into death, through death, I should say. I see a hand.
Okay, yes, and we also have a question. So let me go to the question first from Magda, and then Scott will get to you, okay? Magda says, I knew that Isis equals ice equals lunar moon. So why is she wearing different earrings, one representing the sun and one the moon?
Yeah, well, the solar aspect connects to the second principle, which is the realm of the soul, which is also, from a higher perspective, a form aspect. The realm of souls is sent forth by the monad, which in turn sends forth the incarnation. She represents, the second and third principles in that sense. We get clues to this. She was, to the ancients, she was the mother of the sun, and thus was of a cosmic stature. To be mother of the sun was a, and she was daughter of Saturn, I believe that's correct. And therefore was really primordial in that sense. But importantly, she includes both the soul and the, you could say, intelligent activity aspect. A lot of this has to do with the dual nature of the mental plane, which has both the lower mind and that soul-infused higher mind. And she's also seen as the receiver of the cosmic mind, which was represented by Hermes, or Hermes Trismegistus, right? Actually, it was Hermes had a vision of Pymander, who introduced himself as the universal mind, and she was able to tap into that source, and thus is the source of intelligent activity in the substantive world, and that includes the higher subplanes, the mental planes, or the soul levels. Okay.
Okay, and then Scott, you want to go ahead?
Okay. Thinking about I don't know if you've brought this up yet or if you're going to, I remember in one of the Bailey books, I thought it was EA, talks about the three Marys.
Right.
Mary's, Isis, and Eve. Those are the, but I don't remember where it was. But that would be interesting. Bring that
Yeah,
back.
it would be interesting to pull it up. You could do a
Yeah, it was, I'm pretty sure it was in EA, and
I
I
do-
think it had to do with Virgo.
That's what I thought too. It should be there.
Oh, good. Well, you could do a local search in your PDF of Virgo and probably pull it up. Could you do that, Scott, and bring it back?
Yes, but I'm not going away yet.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
when you're done, that would be great. We'll come back to that because that's an important reference. It's very much related to three levels, as and it's one of the few, maybe the only, reference to Isis by DK. So it's particularly valuable that way.
yeah, I think it is. It's very rare.
Yeah.
The tripleness of Isis. One takes me to that reference, and also think of it as an energy that's focused in Taurus and in Virgo, being a triple sign itself. And either that connects up with the Capricorn and makes it a Earth triangle, or it's going Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, feminine three signs, that trinity.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know, just some ideas. I think he's going to get into more the Virgo aspect.
But yeah, he does briefly. He doesn't explore it as much as you are right now, though. I like that. He just introduces that aspect of her. Isis is an overarching feminine archetype that includes pretty much all other feminine goddesses in her purview. They were all aspects of her. So yeah, and one of them being the Virgin and everything that has to do with that in Virgo, with that energy in Virgo. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Anything else?
I
No,
found it.
Oh,
Great.
good. Thank you. You want to read it?
Well, I just closed it by accident.
what page? No, you wouldn't remember.
Well, I put it in the chat.
Oh, great.
Oh, great. Here, let me pull it up. I'll pull it up the chat and
253 maybe.
okay, ISIS 2. Yeah, EA 253.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I got it now.
okay,
It
great.
is an allegory teaching the emergence of the spiritual man from the control of matter. Wait a minute, I just changed my view. Okay, there we go. Three of the goddesses are Eve, Isis, and Mary. They are of peculiar and significant importance where our civilization is concerned, for they embody in humanity is concerned. The developed and qualified, oh, wait a minute. For our civilization is concerned, for they embody in themselves the symbology of the entire form nature, which
Okay.
when integrated and functioning as a whole person, we call the personality. This personality, as far as humanity is concerned, the developed and qualified expression of the third aspect of divinity, that
Okay.
of God, the Holy Spirit, the active intelligence, the nurturing mother of the Christ child.
Mhm.
Eve is the symbol of the mental nature and
Mhm.
of the mind and of man attracted by the lure of knowledge to be gained through the experience of incarnation. Eve therefore took the apple of knowledge from the serpent of matter and started the long human undertaking of experiment, experience, and expression, which was initiated from the mental angle in our Aryan times. Isis stands for the same expression down on the emotional or astral plane. Eve has no child in her arms. The germ of the Christ life is as yet too small to make its presence felt. The involutionary process is yet too close, but in Isis, the midway point is reached. The quickening of that which is desired, the desire of all nations, it is as it is called in the Bible, has taken place, and Isis consequently stands in the ancient zodiacs for fertility, for motherhood as the guardian of the child. Mary carries the process down to the plane or place of incarnation, the physical plane, and there gives birth to the Christ child. In these three virgins and these three mothers of the Christ, you have the history of the formation and the function of the three aspects of the personality through which the Christ must find expression. The sign of Virgo itself stands for synthesis of these three feminine aspects, Eve, Isis, and Mary. She is the Virgin Mother, providing that which is needed for the mental, emotional, and physical expression of the hidden but ever-present divinity. These three expressions are brought to the needed perfection in Leo, the sign of the individual, develops self-consciousness and personality unfoldment.
Thank you. Yeah, that's well, there's no one like TK, is there? So, this is a really good candidate for those three cornucopia. If you look at Isis as the vehicle for all three of those expressions, which is the way, certainly the way the Egyptians looked at it, it wasn't just, they even broke out aspects. For instance, Hathor was much more the nurturing mother aspect, and Nephthys was much more the mental aspect, the weaver, the weaver of thought forms. She wove the outer existence into being. But these are all, sisters of Isis, and therefore one with her in old Egyptian, in the original Egyptian thought, right? She and Isis, as an amalgam, was able to pierce the veil that separated her from Pymander, and was able to receive the impress of the universal mind. That suggests the Eve aspect of Isis. Yeah, Scott.
Thinking about the triple cornucopia, and I think we know that a triangle completes what a pair begins. So it's always a trinity, and you go, well, where's the trinity of horns? There are two with Taurus. There are none with Virgo, and there's the unicorn with Capricorn. That's your three horns.
Mm-hmm.
Earth triangle.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Somehow we don't fit Virgo in there as the one that holds them together, the mother, but no horns.
As part of its.
Well, she has the horn underneath her, right? The moon, but.
Right. Yeah, I like that. It's interesting because there's you translate cornucopia into a horn of plenty, but that works.
Well, that's associated with like Jupiter and Taurus or something. It's a Jupiterian quality, that's horn of plenty.
Right, which is hierarchical ruler of Virgo. So that's going to be right in there. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for that.
Marguerite says in the Kabbalah, the third Sephra is Bina. I'm sorry if I'm murdering these. This is the great mother, the female potency of the universe.
Yeah, that's right. And that's really, you could say, a more transcendent source, as a Sephiroth of this concept, that's embodied by so many goddesses, but Isis is probably the most complete series of thought forms around this concept of that is illustrated by that Bina, that third Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. Exactly. Good comment. Anyone
And then,
else?
yeah,
Yeah.
Magda says, I'm thinking Isis as Mary Magdalene was able to tap into Hermes as Jesus, vision of Pymander's as the Christ, Isis, Eva, Magdalena, all incarnate the feminine primary creative principle. They wear two earrings. They are all symbolically both sun and moon, mothers and spouses of the child.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Is that in the chat?
Yes.
Cool. Let me read it. Yeah. Mary Magdalene. Yeah. Good thoughts. I don't have particularly anything to add to that. And if people know more about the specific nature of Mary Magdalene, that would be great. We could hear more about that. All right. Anyone else?
That's all I see right now.
Okay. Good thoughts.
Up,
Oh,
up, up, up. Go ahead. Go ahead. We see your hand, Magda. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. I wanted to ask why isn't that famous why Mary Magdalene is Isis or is Eva? Because I'm kind of curious to ask you this because you know so much about Isis and Eve, but of the latest wisdom, which is the Golgotha mysteries, which, where we study about Mary Magdalene, this very controversial figure, because until now, I guess it's not known even by, even by you guys. I mean, that you know so much, so many things. And I'm very curious why we cannot go more deeply into the Golgotha mysteries, why we're going into all these ancient mysteries. It would be so great because I really feel, and certain researches are really pointing to the fact that, Mary Magdalene, the Miriam, Magdala is the Tower of the Tarots. Magda is the town in Palestine where, where everything had place in 2000 years ago. And I feel many people feel, especially in the anthroposophical field, I know the problems we've had, but it's very interesting to unite these knowledges, I feel. And, it's still very controversial even for us here because no one really, there are so many sayings about she was the spouse, no, she was Joan the Baptist's sister, no, she was Lazarus' sisters, no, she was just a disciple of Jesus, then became Christ in the latest 3 years before crucifixion. And so it's very debated everywhere and not very known. And I really feel that it's in the latest great mystery of Golgotha is sitting the key to go on and understanding and uniting everything again, after 150 years. This is a special period. I think we all know it and we all feel it. And it's, I think, very important that we reunite this. And Mary Magdalene is the new Isis, so to say, the newest Isis. So we need to look into that. I really deeply feel this. And the mysteries with the Steiner input, which I know he had many many limits like everybody else, but this is the time to reunite all the debates, all the polemics and all the misunderstandings and all these things. No, I'm right, this is the time. And Mary Magdalene is the feminine principle that's going to unite all this, as lyric and crazy as that might sound.
No, not at all. And, you're always welcome to, provide content, so if you want to do a little research that would help illuminate this process, of understanding the divine feminine, which is really what we're talking about here in the form of Isis, then, please do that research and we'll give you a voice during this webinar because it's all interesting. The strongest impression that I had of Magdalene was when I visited and studied the Cathars in southern France, and they believe that Jesus left Palestine with Magdalene, and they came to the southern coast of France and established this new order out of which the Cathars came forward. And it was a fascinating, it's been years now since I was down there, but it was very powerful.
Yes.
Of course, it was crushed by the prevailing Catholic power structure of the time and the French king. They wiped him out, but it had its moment in history. But that's about all I know about this enigmatic figure. So if you want to bring some more info, be glad to.
Yes, you said the right thing. I mean, from Mary Magdalene, we go into then Provence, south of France, Saint-Marie de la Mer, this town, this little fisherman's town where she
I was there.
With Philip, and her daughter is not clear about that, or she had 2 children of Jesus that became the Christ. And it's very debated about that is called the Archangel Michael's line, from Scotland down to Jerusalem and passing especially through Italy and Provence in France. And that's the Graal, the story of the Essenes, the Essenes sect. Then as the Cathars, as you said, and the Templars, and then with the Molay, the Mason of the Templar.
Right.
I don't know how you spell it. The Molay, Jacques de Molay. He was killed as the last Templar. Then the Templars were finished. But that there resides. That's the Grail. That's the latest Grail. The Magdalene, the child, the Merovingian bloody line. And
actually, it's the line of Jesus was,
yes, and Steiner too. He focused on that after. He broke up with the theosophy. He focused on the Golgotha mystery, and it's something that we need to put together a lot with all your knowledge. Because that is really what's going on now. He predicted exactly what entities and where they're going to be. Italy, where I reside, here I'm Italian. Italy has failed initiation in 2020, 3 years ago with the COVID situation, and now it's Italy. As Babaji and many other people prophesied, I think even not Behold, but I don't remember the other theosophy's name. But many people, prophesize exactly what's going on in Italy right now. So it was clear that was going to happen as the head of the situation, the historical situation now. So just thank you for this, and as I will, go by, try to integrate all this as I've been trying to do all along. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, it's good to have your voice in this. It's the Steinerian point of view. I think Italy is the site of one of the major schools, according to DK. Isn't that correct, BL? I think it's where one of the major schools of the Aquarian Age will come into being. And
I'm sorry, I don't remember right off the top of my head.
Right. But anyway, that said, Magdalene and all she represents is an aspect, you could say, of the Isis that is being presented here, not the specific Isis of the astral plane that DK talks about, but this overarching Isis, which is the, you could say the solar and sublunary source of all manifestation, right? And Magdalene would be an aspect of that. It's quite interesting. And in terms of why we don't explore it right now, right, it is that we follow this text and elaborate or move from the associations brought forth by the text of the secret teachings. So that's the guiding principle for this particular webinar series.
Francis?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Martha also added to the perspective on Mary Magdalene. She said, Mary Magdalene emerged with the later findings of scriptural texts. She was deeply important to Jesus according to these later findings, Gospel of St. Thomas, etc., in agreement with what was said earlier about her importance. Confusion has to do with first suppression after Jesus's life, which made it hard to gather.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, these new gospels, I remember reading Thomas many years ago, and it was what a different face was given to Mary Magdalene in that gospel. Truly extraordinary. It's worth a read if anybody's interested. Gospel of Thomas, I'm sure you could download it as a PDF if you want a different take on the life of Jesus. All right, good discussion. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. I just wanted to say the letters on occult meditation have DK lists where the new mystery schools will be.
Oh, good.
Okay. Isis
Oh,
holds.
wait a minute. Can you
Yeah.
confirm that Italy is?
I didn't look it up. I know I
Oh,
have.
you didn't look it up. You just.
I know it's in
Okay.
that book. I have it upstairs
Oh, okay.
because we had brought this up some other time. Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay, go ahead, Marie.
I will look it up when I get a chance. All right.
All right, that's great.
Isis holds in her right hand a small sailing ship with the spindle of a spinning wheel for its mast. From the top of the mast projects a water jug, its handle shaped like a serpent swelled with venom. This indicates that Isis steers the bark of life, full of troubles and miseries, on the stormy ocean of time. The spindle symbolizes the fact that she spins and cuts the thread of life. These emblems further signify that Isis abounds in humidity, by means of which she nourishes all natural bodies, preserving them from the heat of the sun by humidifying them with nutritious moisture from the atmosphere. Moisture supports vegetation, but this subtle humidity, the life ether, is always more or less infected by some venom proceeding from corruption or decay. It must be purified by being brought into contact with the invisible cleansing fire of nature. This fire digests, perfects, and revitalizes the substance in order that the humidity may become a universal medicine to heal and renew all the bodies in nature. The serpent throws off its skin annually and is thereby renewed, symbolic of the resurrection of the spiritual life from the material nature. This renewal of the earth takes place every spring, when the vivifying spirit of the sun returns to the countries of the Northern Hemisphere.
Okay, a lot in this passage. First, we have Isis holds in her right hand a small sailing ship with the spindle of a spinning wheel for its mast. Something that just occurred to me is that Nephthys or Neith, Neith, was an aspect of Isis who was the weaver. And so that would be certainly being referenced in that spindle of the spinning wheel. There's a few possible meanings for the small sailing ship. Most archetypally, water is a symbol for all manifestation. Thus, as the personification of primordial matter, Isis would naturally be master of the seas. She was, in fact, patroness of sailors and of navigation, especially during the Ptolemaic or late period in Egypt. She also sailed in the myth connected with the death of Osiris. She sailed up and down the Nile, searching for and finding 13 of the 14 pieces of Osiris's body that were scattered by Set or Typhon, depending on which myth you read. 13 is the penultimate feminine number, with the 14th, the phallus, being the seminal, literally, seminal source of the 13, the latter representing the manifest world or the universe. Also, the Nile is a symbol for the primordial ocean of space, which she helps the deceased to cross on their journey to Menti, which is the Egyptian afterlife. And that, yeah. The spindle ties Isis to Neith, one of Isis's major aspects, who, quote, wove the world into existence by spinning the thread of outer life for all sentient beings. Weaving, DK tells us, is a very third aspect symbol. Neith also had the Christ-like ability to cast her net, her woven net, into the sea in order to save drowning men. That is, to draw them up out of the seas of astral glamour. So, I see her as very much a mental plane polarized, like an Eve figure who, through these the higher thought forms of the higher mental plane, can save drowning men.
Francis?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple of comments here. Magda says, so yes, after the Templars were defeated, Christian Rosenkreuz, Saint Germain entity is believed, started with the Anthroposophy Rosicrucian order and initiation way in order to continue to preserve the Sangre Real descendants of Jesus and Magdalene. In other words, the bloodline of Jesus and Magdalene. And then he says, those who take initiation on the line of the Mahachohan or on the third ray will take it at the advanced occult school in Italy. So that answers that. In this way, the Occident will have its center where active instruction may be given according to the 3 lines of approach, and which will give preparation in the inner mysteries. And that's in Letters on Occult Meditation, page 308.
Okay, great. Thank you for both of those ideas. Yeah, if you're interested in what Magda was talking about, the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail is, I've read it twice. It's absolutely fascinating account. I think it's what Dan Brown made his popular novels. He based them on the work that's shown in Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It explores this whole concept, of the spirit bloodline of the Christ, and that whole mystery of southern France. It's really fascinating. I see a hand.
Yes, Yvonne, go
Okay,
ahead.
I do have letters in occult meditation. It is on page 308. Preparatory grades advanced schools will be in Egypt, California, Italy, Ireland, Russia, Australia. But there's a whole chapter on that.
Yeah.
207, let's see, 297 to about 333 in the letters on occult meditation.
Yeah, he talks about this is why, you know, this was the inspiration for the Moria Federation. You know, Michael thought, well, you know, we can't set up a preparatory school yet, but we can set up a school that will prepare people for the preparatory school. And that was really the inspiration behind the Moria Federation. Anyone else? Okay, so we're talking about the sailing ship that has this mast in the shape of a spindle, right? So next up, from the top of the mast projects a water jug. Its handle shaped like a serpent, swelled with venom. This indicates that Isis steers the bark of life, full of troubles and miseries, on the stormy ocean of time. Okay. It can have other meanings. The water jug, especially in its placement atop the mast, might also represent Akasha, which is associated with the monadic plane, which is the second plane, and therefore connected with the second aspect and with love wisdom, which HPB describes as the super sensuous spiritual essence which pervades all space, the source of our vital selves. I'm thinking the waters of life that are poured forth for thirsty men in Aquarius, and you know, through this jug, right, this vessel. The fact that it has a handle in the shape of a serpent adds the idea of cyclic periodic renewal, as well as, you know, the concept of wisdom. So you have love, wisdom in this combined vehicle, with the venom representing death, which is part of the life and death cycle, and the waters in the jug, regeneration and renewal. The mast then could represent the various levels of manifestation. You know, if you have this jug representing the Akashic at the top of the mast, then the mast itself could represent various levels of manifestation, with the boat itself representing, you know, either the physical etheric vehicle or the three lower subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, either one. At a more primordial level, it is the boat that carries the 7 Prajapatis. See, I think that make up all existence, which is also called Kala Hamsa. So you can see it in almost a cosmic or much more esoteric level in this way. Okay. Next, the spindle symbolizes the fact that she spins and cuts the thread of life. With this, MPH connects Isis with the 3 fates in Greek mythology. Remember, she is this overarching goddess. If you remember at the very beginning of the chapter, there was a whole page of all of her qualities, and they're so expansive and universal that they really do enclose or contain aspects of all the extant goddesses of the ancient world, including these 3 fates in Greek mythology, which are Clotho, the spinner, who creates the thread of life from her spindle, thus representing birth and the beginning of life. That would be very much like Neith. Lachesis, the allotter, who measures the length of the thread of life with her rod, She determines how long each person lives and what events would occur during their life. And Atropos, she's in the middle here, the inflexible, who cuts the thread of life with her scissors. She decides when and how each person will die and cannot be persuaded otherwise. Okay. Next, these emblems further signify that Isis abounds in humidity, by means of which she nourishes all natural bodies, preserving them from the heat of the sun by prehumidifying them with nutritious moisture from the atmosphere. So starting with this paragraph, this passage, we turn a corner into Isis as a major symbol for ancient Egyptian alchemy, because humidity is one of the 4 alchemical states of matter, the other 3 being dryness, heat, and cold, each responsible for a phase of material existence. Appropriately, humidity is the stage of generation and waxing abundance. Next, moisture supports vegetation, but this subtle humidity, life ether, is always more or less infected by some venom proceeding from corruption or decay. This relates back to the jug with the serpent handle, remember, full of venom. So material life is inherently imperfect. And the form aspect, literally the matter that makes up the form aspect, has within it the seeds of its own death. But through its use, through this fact, the spirit aspect, in the guise of the imprisoned soul, gradually reascends to its non-material source. DK makes a number of references to the fact that disease is inherent in matter because it has its origins in the previous solar system. And next up, any thoughts or questions? Keep them coming. Right on cue, Yvonne.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, we have 3 diseases from the previous solar system, according to esoteric healing.
Right.
TB, syphilis, and what was the other one?
Tuberculosis, syphilis, or it's actually
TB,
what?
TB, syphilis, and cancer.
That's right.
Cancer it's in the ground, it's in the air, it's in the earth itself.
Right. I think he might have stated syphilis specifically in one point, but he relates to it more generally as disorders connected with the generative organs at other places. But yeah, those are the 3. Yeah, he talks on this at some length in esoteric healing, these 3.
Yeah, they're called endemic.
Endemic, yeah, meaning that they're fundamental to matter itself. Yeah, thank you for that, Yvonne. Okay, it must be purified, talking about matter, by being brought into contact with the invisible cleansing fire of nature. This fire digests, perfects, and revitalizes this substance in order that the humidity may become a universal medicine. Think again of the jug, right, and the waters of life, humidity, to heal and renew all the bodies in nature. So MPH here introduces the duality of fire and humidity, fire and water, which has very specific meaning in alchemy, wherein humidity was the method of dissolution by which matter was liquefied and thereby separated into its components parts And fire was the method of coagulation, during which matter was reformulated into a new substance. Alchemically, this ever-present cycle process is called solve et coagule. We see this process represented by the phoenix, which is periodically reborn out of the ashes of its pre-existence as a firebird, and therefore its reformation is represented by the phoenix. But both processes are equally important. The idea that there is a dissolution of the old made possible by water prior to the reformulation of the form aspect by fire. I mean, if you think of this just in terms of what we know about the fire of the mental plane and the abode of the soul and the watery aspect, which is a symbol for matter in general, it's quite a theosophical understanding. Finally, the serpent throws off its skin annually and is thereby renewed, symbolic of the resurrection of the spiritual life from the material nature. This renewal of the earth takes place every spring when the vivifying spirit of the sun returns to the countries of the northern hemisphere. This is a pretty straightforward example of the cycles of death and rebirth, and therefore the dual influence of Isis. Any thoughts or questions?
Well, Magda says fire to water, alchemy's albedo phase.
Okay, let me look at that. Alchemy's go away icon. I have this icon blocking it. Okay, right about alchemy's albedo. I don't know what an albedo phase is. You want to explain that?
She says purification moon. Yeah, please explain, Magda.
Yes, they are the three phases of the grand opera, the magnum opera, the great opera. Nigredo, which is the black part, which is the earth element, and the putrefaction, decomposition, separation, the vitriol, the solve and coagula, you mentioned the vitriol, that's the chaos, primordial chaos, Saturn, night. Then the second phase is the albedo, which is the whitening associated with water, with the moon, the feminine, and then the third phase, which is the rubedo, red, associated with fire, the philosophical Mercury, meaning the coagulation, the fusion between masculine and feminine. Right. So the chemical nuptials, the chemical wedding between anima and spirit. So the chemical nuptials of Christian Rodenford, Rosenkreuz, and the philosophical stone and all that, Hermes and all that.
We're going to get into right now. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard this particular phrase, albedo phase. Thank you for that. Okay.
You're welcome.
Right. So anyone else? We're going to be taking an in-depth look at this alchemical process coming up, because he does. He really turns a corner and begins to associate Isis in terms of this ancient alchemical practice. So we'll go along with him. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
The symbolic virgin carries in her left hand a sistrum and a cymbal, or square frame of metal, which, when struck, gives the keynote of nature, fa. Sometimes also an olive branch, to indicate the harmony she preserves among natural things with her regenerating power. By the processes of death and corruption, she gives life to a number of creatures of diverse forms, through periods of perpetual change. The symbol is made square instead of the usual triangular shape in order to symbolize that all things are transmuted and regenerated according to the harmony of the four elements. Dr. Sigismund Bachstrom believed that if a physician could establish harmony among the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and I can't see behind a black square there, sorry. So I'll have to skip some words.
Wait a minute. And
Sorry,
just tell me when you can come back in. And unite them into a stone, the philosopher's stone,
symbolized by the six-pointed star or two interlaced triangles. He would possess the means of healing all disease. Dr. Bachstrom further stated that there was no doubt in his mind that the universal omnipresent fire, spirit of nature, does all and is all in all. By attraction, repulsion, motion, heat, sublimation, evaporation, exsication, inspissation, coagulation, and fixation, the universal fire, spirit, manipulates matter and manifests throughout creation. Any individual who can understand these principles and adapt them to the three departments of nature becomes a true philosopher.
Thank you, Vivienne. If it was your control bar for Zoom that was hiding the text, you can grab any corner of that with your cursor and drag it away to another area if that's what was hiding your words there.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah. Okay, so first up we have the symbolic virgin carries, oh wait a minute, is that right? Yeah, carries in her left hand a sistrum and a symbol or square frame of metal, which when struck gives the keynote of nature, fa. So we've learned about the sistrum last webinar. There's a whole little section on the sistrum, which when shaken circulates the elements. Do you remember that? It keeps the elements in motion, the four elements in combination, you could say. But we're here told that Isis also carries a square metal frame that produces the note fa, the natural keynote of the world. The square always symbolizes the form world. Fa is the fourth note, which is associated with the heart center and was often used in sacred music and healing, maybe still is. All these qualities are expressive of Isis. In fact, esoterically, Isis herself is the keynote of nature. Remember, the sun and moon placed at her ears, representing the causal sound and manifested note of existence. Next, sometimes also an olive branch to indicate the harmony she preserves among natural things with her regenerating power. As before stated, the olive is a symbol, aside from being of harmony in older times, it was a symbol of resurrection and immortality. It's an evergreen, and therefore it's a symbol of, as all evergreens, of both resurrection and immortality. Next, by the process of death and corruption, she gives life to a number of creatures of diverse forms through periods of perpetual change. DK gives us more insight in his introductory postulates at the beginning of a treatise on cosmic fire as to this cyclic quality, right? Every manifested life has its three great cycles. Actually, I'll just read this myself, which are under the purview of Isis in her 3-in-1 aspect, right? You have birth, life, and death, appearance, growth, and disappearance, involution, evolution, and obscuration or pralaya, inert motion, activity, and rhythmic motion, also called equilibrium, tamasic life, rajasic life, and sattvic life. So remember when we were looking at the triple cornucopia, well, we have other examples of these triplicities given here as well. So next up, the symbol is made square instead of the usual triangular shape in order to symbolize that all things are transmuted and regenerated according to the harmony of the four elements. So another aspect associated with the number four, the four elements, right? Harmony is also an aspect of the fourth ray. And then we get into the writings of Dr. Sigismund Backstrom, Sigismund. So he believed that if a physician could establish harmony among the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and unite them into a quote unquote stone, the philosopher's stone, symbolized by a six-pointed star or two interlaced triangles, he would possess the means of healing all disease. So Backstrom was considered by many alchemists to be the last of the great European masters of alchemy. He was a major influence in this discipline, as well as in the Rosicrucian movement. Among his major works are the Golden Chain of Homer, a translation of an alchemical treatise by Jean d'Espagnet, which was published by Helena Blavatsky in the theosophical magazine Lucifer in 1891, which is quite an endorsement in itself, and Backstrom's Alchemical Anthology, a collection of 18 alchemical texts, translations, illustrations, and correspondences compiled by Backstrom between 1790 and 1808. So, Backstrom tells us that by establishing harmony among the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, these elements can be united to form the philosopher's stone. So what is that? In the form world, the philosopher's stone is a literal substance, in the outer discipline, which is, it's a literal substance that has the ability to transform base metals into gold. Hence the term aurific unctuosity we ran into in MPH's text. I think it was last time. It was also thought to be an elixir of life that could cure illnesses, prolong life, and bring about spiritual revitalization. Backstrom claims to have actually obtained the philosopher's stone, as well as two alchemical substances, which he called the red and white powder, from his Rosicrucian master, Count Louis de Chazal, in Mauritius in 1794. It's quite a little story, actually. In his anthology, Backstrom says that he actually witnessed several transmutations by his Rosicrucian master, who used these red and white powders, and that he had himself performed some transmutations using mercury and antimony, I think it is. In Theosophy, the philosopher's stone is a metaphor for divine knowledge, as well as the spiritual transformation that occurs when one attains the hidden wisdom. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first we have a comment.
Uh-huh.
Magda, oops, wait a minute. Oh, okay. Magda says, Jesus Christ enters Jerusalem on a donkey holding palms of olives, representing purity entering the sacred city, just before being betrayed, arrested, and crucified.
Okay, yeah. Is a reference about the nature of the olive branch, you know. Yeah. See, I'm looking at it. Okay, thank you.
Oops, there's a couple of other things here, but Scott wanted to delay. So Scott, how about if you read this page for us, please?
Okay, let me see if I can get. Yeah. Where then lies the truth, real secret so much talked about by the Hermeticists? That there was and there is a secret no candid student of esoteric literature will ever doubt. That this great secret, commonly termed, quote, the philosopher's stone, unquote, had a spiritual as well as a physical meaning attached to it, was suspected in all ages. The author of, quote, remarks on alchemy, unquote, very truly observes that the subject of the Hermetic art is man, and the object of the art is the perfection of man. The fact alone that man, in their eyes, is a trinity, which they divide into soul, water of mercury, and sulfur, which is the secret fire, or to speak plain, into body, soul, and spirit, shows that there is a physical side to the question. Man is the philosopher's stone spiritually, quote, a triune or trinity in unity, unquote, says Philaetes' expression, as he expresses it.
It's here.
But he is also the stone physically. The latter is but the effect of the cause, and the cause is the universal solvent of everything, divine spirit. Man is a correlation of chemical, physical forces, as well as a correlation of spiritual powers.
Well said, HPB, from Isis Unveiled. Yeah, so she was referencing this text, as you see here. So here's the six-pointed star from Backstrom's anthology, which is references the shape of the philosopher's stone. In alchemy, fire is symbolized as an upward pointing triangle, while air, its elemental opposite, is also an upward pointing triangle. You can see it here on either corner, but with a horizontal line through its center. Water is symbolized as a downward pointing triangle, while earth, its elemental opposite, here's water, is also a downward pointing triangle, but with a horizontal line through its center. In this way, the elemental quaternary and the double triangle are brought together. And it's somewhat illustrated in this illustration. Next, Dr. Backstrom further stated that there was no doubt in his mind that the universal, omnipresent fire, spirit of nature, does all and is all in all. Said in alchemical terms, ... Can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Magda, can you read that for us, please?
Our philosophical mercurial water, secret fire, is the key whereby all coagulated, fixed, and unifixed metallic and mineral bodies are radically and physically dissolved and reduced into their first principle. This mercurial water has been kept very secret by all the philosophers as the secret of the whole art.
Backstrom's alchemical. Yeah, This is where all this appears. Yeah, it's my understanding is that the outer mixing of these source substances is fundamentally a symbol for the inner work that we must do in order to return to monadic consciousness. But I also believe that there really were physical alchemists, but that the outer work that they did was just an outer symbol of the inner work that they were doing. In other words, if you happen to luck out and run across the red and white powder and you had not developed your consciousness, that you couldn't do anything with it. You couldn't produce some result in consciousness with physical substance. That's just not the way the cause and effect works, right? So it's this very intricate, but I think quite interesting system for describing the process of purification and regeneration of our both our form aspect and of our consciousness. Okay, let's see here. Finally, by attraction, repulsion, motion, heat, sublimation, evaporation, exsication, inspissation, coagulation, and fixation, the universal fire, spirit, manipulates matter and manifests throughout creation. Any individual who can understand these principles and adapt them to the three departments of nature becomes a true philosopher. Okay, so let's take a closer look at these terms. I apologize if it seems like we're going into the weeds here, but there's also going to be a whole chapter coming up on alchemy. So this is as good a time as any to begin to understand these processes that are involved. So could we get a reader, please? As we read, consider the theosophical meanings. For example, DK tells us that the law of attraction is the law governing the soul aspect, and that the law of repulsion is one of the laws governing the form aspect. So you'll find if you keep this type of thing in mind, that there is an interrelation between our theosophical understanding and these terms. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, Tia, I'm going to ask you to read that, but first let me just say what Magda has typed in here. She says, my understanding is that the human body is the alchemist's vase or tool needed to cook the substances and transform it into gold, spiritual gold, meaning we need to learn how to transform matter.
Yeah, by coming into awareness of the law of attraction, the second principle begins to do its alchemical work, which is to purify the form, and this takes place over lifetimes, not just within one life, purify the forms so as to be a better, a more representative habitation for the indwelling spirit, right? And this is a continuing process that can be described in alchemical terms until that great day when we return to the Father's house and we become gold, and all the transformation process has been undergone. That's my understanding. Okay.
All right, and then Pia, I want you to read, but she made one comment also. So
Uh-huh.
let me read that first. It says, it may be interesting to ponder how the practice of alchemy may be externalized, subjective versus objective during the Aquarian seventh ray age.
Yeah, the seventh ray for sure. I think this is a very seventh ray process, because it's the idea is of the seventh ray is to bring spirit into matter. And the return path as well, which is to bring the form aspect ever closer to spirit. So yeah, it would be interesting. Will there be, a some master who reincarnates to revitalize this work, in probably different in a different format, but nonetheless with the same essence guiding him. Okay, Tia.
Attraction, the tendency of some substances to draw or adhere to each other, often due to the magnetic or electric forces. In alchemy, attraction was sometimes used to separate or purify metals, or to explain the affinity of certain elements or principles. Repulsion, the opposite of attraction, the tendency of some substances to push away or resist each other, often due to magnetic or electric forces. In alchemy, repulsion was sometimes used to separate or purify metals, or to explain the antipathy of certain elements or principles. Motion, the change of position or state of a substance, often caused by external forces or internal impulses. In alchemy, motion was considered a sign of life and activity, and was essential for the generation and transformation of matter. Motion was also associated with heat, fire, and spirit. Heat, the degree of intensity of thermal energy in a substance, often measured by its effect on other substances or on the senses. In alchemy, heat was one of the 4 basic qualities that determine the nature of matter, along with cold, dryness, and moisture. Heat was also a source of motion and change, and was often applied to substances through fire or other means to induce chemical reactions. Sublimation, the process of changing a solid substance directly into a gas without passing through a liquid state. In alchemy, sublimation was used to purify and refine substances, especially volatile ones like mercury or sulfur. Sublimation was also seen as a symbol of spiritual elevation and transcendence.
Thank you, Tia. And to finish the list, can we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, I can. Evaporation. Is that where we're?
That's right.
Okay. Evaporation. In alchemy, evaporation was used to separate and purify substances, especially aqueous ones like water or alcohol. Evaporation was also seen as a symbol of spiritual liberation and detachment. Exsication, the process of removing moisture from a substance, usually by heating it or exposing it to dry air. In alchemy, exsication was used to dry and solidify substances, especially moist ones like salt or earth. Exsication was also seen as a symbol of spiritual consolidation and stability. Incipization, the process of thickening a liquid substance by reducing its volume, usually by heating it or evaporating some of its solvent. In alchemy, incipization was used to concentrate and enrich substances, especially liquid ones like water or oil. Incipization was also seen as a symbol of spiritual intensification and potency. Coagulation, the process of changing a fluid substance into a solid or semi-solid one, usually by cooling it or adding another substance that causes it to clot or a curdle. In alchemy, coagulation was used to fix and congeal substances, especially fluid ones, like mercury or blood. Coagulation was also seen as a symbol of spiritual manifestation and completion. Fixation, the process of making a volatile substance stable and resistant to change, usually by heating it with another substance that binds or absorbs its vapor. In alchemy, fixation was used to preserve and perfect substances, especially volatile ones like sulfur or spirit. Fixation was also seen as a symbol of spiritual immortality and perfection. Chemistry of Isaac Newton.
Yeah, Isaac Newton was an alchemist, something the scientific community would just as soon ignore. In fact, they do. But he was actually an avid alchemist, interestingly. In fact, here's one of his drawings from a Concord of Alchemy and Theology. Yeah. So it's interesting. This list that is given us here by MPH, except for the process of coagulation as shown here, he doesn't include any of the 7 classical alchemical stages, which are directly associated with the planets and their respective metals. And so one more time, with the reading on these definitions. I apologize if this is going a little too deep, but I feel compelled to do it. It's just one page, though. These are the 7 progressive stages that are used in alchemy. So if we could get a reader, please.
Ann Parker, can you read those for us, please?
Sure. Calcination, the first stage, represented by Saturn and lead, involved the burning or decomposition of a substance into ashes. This stage symbolizes the destruction of the ego and the attachment to material things. Dissolution, the second stage, represented by Jupiter and tin, involves the dissolution of the ashes in water or acid. This stage symbolizes the release of emotions and subconscious impulses that were repressed by the ego. Separation, the third stage, represented by Mars and iron, involves the separation of the pure from the impure elements in the solution. This stage symbolizes the discernment of the true self from the false self and the rejection of what is harmful or unnecessary. Conjunction, the fourth stage, represented by Venus and copper, involves the recombination of the purified elements into a new substance. This stage symbolized the union of opposites, such as masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, spirit and matter. Fermentation, the fifth stage, represented by Mercury and Quicksilver, involves the introduction of a fermenting agent, such as yeast or bacteria, to induce a chemical transformation. This stage symbolizes the death and rebirth of the substance, as well as the alchemist's own spiritual awakening. Distillation, the sixth stage, represented by the moon and silver, involves the purification of the substance by heating and condensing it repeatedly. This stage symbolizes the refinement of the spirit and the attainment of higher wisdom. Coagulation, the seventh and final stage, represented by the sun and gold, involves the solidification of the substance into a red powder or stone. This stage symbolizes the completion of the great work and the manifestation of the philosopher's stone, which conferred enlightenment and immortality on the alchemist.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so, if you just read the philosophical aspects of each of these stages, they're quite theosophical, destruction of the ego and detachment from material things, release of emotions and subconscious impulses, the discernment of the true self. You also see that they're progressive. Discernment of the true from the false self, that could be, the stage of the the dispelling the great illusion at the third initiation, whereas the second one, dissolution, could be related to the second initiation. And then the union of the pairs of opposites, which could be soul and spirit and matter, but also soul and personality. I mean, I won't go all the way through, but you get the idea that if you weight it towards its spiritual meaning, it's not just this sort of bewildering series of chemical processes, Anyway, I just want you, yeah, I see a hand.
Okay, but hold on a minute, Scott. Magda says these 7 definitions seem to carry the same progressive system of classic alchemy. Nigredo, black, sodden, separation. Albedo, light, moon, distillation, water, feminine. Rudido, red, fire, mercury, phoenix, coagulation.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, there's a lot, it just depends on who is interpreting the treatise, but so much of it is going to be similar in that. So, yeah, Scott?
I have a couple of comments to go way back into what we were talking about. So I didn't want to interrupt you from finishing up this part of the alchemy stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
This one I haven't even posted yet. The second one deals with what HBB says on the sistrum, at least going by the collected works.
Okay.
The Egyptian ansated cross, the unfolded cube, and the sistrum with its crossbars is, quote, simply the symbol of the deity as man.
The deity what?
The deity as man.
Oh, uh-huh.
However phallic it may have become later after the submergence of Atlantis. So I was just pointing out that just ansated cross and the unfolded cube, which you've done before in the system, they're all that the cross form is that of man.
Yeah, it's a good perspective, isn't it? And, if you think of the definition of the system as, those little rings represent the elements in activity. And so when you shake the system, it keeps the circulation moving. And if you think of that in terms of a human being, not only the lower elements, but also its connection with monad and soul, the idea that you have this continuous circulation of energies between the 3 aspects. And, the idea of the ansated cross or the Ankh, that which is the symbol of Venus. It's a little different, but close enough. The idea of spirit crowning the Tao cross of matter, really does represent man. But yeah, go ahead.
The unfolded cross, or a cube rather, is just 6 pieces, actually. But it's a head to the top of it, which makes it the symbol of Venus that completes the symbol.
That's right. Yeah, if for some reason I hadn't thought of that. That's true. That it really is a form of the ansated cross, isn't it? Or vice versa. It's the Tao with a head, which is the same as the ansated cross or the Ankh, as it's called. Also, the 6 become the 7 when you cross once again with the middle. The one being the 7 at
That's
the
still in the cubical or form-based squares. And when you add the circle at the top, you've transformed it into human. You've taken it out of the 4 and put it in the 3, or what will be the 3.
Yeah.
The other thing I had, I want to throw it in here just way back when we were talking about the Marys, I was looking up what HPB has to say about that, and that's from Collected Works. And she says, there are 3 Marys: Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary's sister, Martha,
Right.
and Mary Magdalene. The latter is, quote, by far the most intuitive, pneumatic, and the most prominent interlocutor of all the 3 disciples. That's his reference, her reference to Mary Magdalene. Continues, HPB notes the 3 Marys, physical mother of Jesus, Mary, sister of Martha, and Mary Magdalene. Listing them in that order corresponds esoterically to Buddha, manas, and lower manas. I say it's clearly a blind, the opposite is correct.
The opposite is correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those, beginner's guide to blinds kind of thing,
This is that back to decanates again. The middle one doesn't change, but the first and third do.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, thanks for that. That's very useful. And I think Magda will probably appreciate that as well. Yeah, because it does definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
It elevates that position. Yeah, that's great. Great stuff. Yeah, you can count on HPV to bring that extraordinary intuition to play, and unlike DK, she often deals with historical and personas, and I mean, DK does some of that, he mentions specific people, but HPB does a lot more of that type of thing. So it's a great reference.
And this is from HPB, this stuff. And then what BL is talking about, we were talking about before, in EA comes, 50, 70 years later, the DK,
Right.
just a little bit. So,
Right, puts his seal of approval on it. Yeah.
yeah.
But he doesn't break down the 3 Marys in that way. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Doesn't he, BL? Understanding?
He breaks them down, but they're saying something a little bit different each time. But yeah, he breaks them down in 3 different ways too.
Mhm.
With
does.
Isis, Mary, and Eve.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
it's-
Yeah, little different though than Martha and Mary Magdalene. That's they're a little different that way. But he, both introduce the idea of 3 aspects, and they seem to be, vertically interrelated, not just horizontally.
Yeah, there's a relationship. And then Martha says, Martha is also part of the story emanating from southern France. The 3 Marys were together, according to these stories.
Oh, uh-huh. Well, sure. Yeah. Okay. Wouldn't that be even true in the standard Bible that the 3 would have been together? Seems to me they would have.
Well, they're talking in southern France, so
Yeah,
that's beyond the
that's beyond, right?
biblical stories. But and
But
then
even in the biblical, the 3 would have. It seems like
right.
they would have known each other, but.
And then Magda goes on to say HPB and Steiner say the same thing in the Golgotha Mysteries
Mhm.
in different times.
Well, I invite you, Magda, to find some juicy quote from the Golgotha and present it next time if you feel like it. Just, take a moment to present it, and Or if you want, you can email me the quote and I can make it a part of the, give you a slide with the information that you're going to quote on screen for you. Just, it's just a thought. You don't have to do it, but, this is a group, I host, but more participation, the better, and your ideas matter to me. So just keeping that up, keeping that going.
And Magda goes on to say, in the Apocryph's Gospels, there is the story of the three Marys.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, yeah. Well, we are out of time. This is as good a place to end as any. Let's see. Yeah, because we're actually coming onto a new page here. So that's great. Good session. I enjoyed this a lot. So the next webinar is this coming Friday for Treatise on Cosmic Fire. I'm always amazed at how interrelated the three webinars become. I also I do some other teaching, and there's just constant interrelation that's just amazing between these three seemingly different sources. I see Scott's hand.
What page are you on in TCF? Do you know?
Right around, let's see, hang on a sec.
That would be posted someplace anyway.
Oh, I can pull it up easily. It is, I'll just. TCF. So it begins on page, looks like 140, what's that say? 148. Yeah, 148 is the beginning. And that's gonna be in review, but it'll immediately follow. Right around there, 148, 150, 48, yeah. 148 is where it starts. Okay. All right, guys. So anyway, yeah, TCF on Friday, same time. And then the next one after that, you want to announce, BL?
Yeah, the Secret Doctrine is on the 20th of August. And then the next Secret Teaching of All Ages is on the 3rd of September.
Just flying through the summer here. Okay, you all, thanks very much. I really enjoy this webinar series. I learn a lot by preparing for them. So until next time, I'll see ya.
Goodbye, everybody.